I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to come out and join us tonight for our town hall to hear some great candidates that will be running on your ballot here in District 2 this November. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the Community Outreach Chair for Lower Shore Progressive Caucus, Claire Boland, who will give kind of the rules for tonight's proceedings.
Okay, so we're going to start from the very beginning. We're going to have the floor open for questions, but we also have some pre-submitted questions from people that couldn't be here, and I'll be mixing those in. We'll actually start with a pre-submitted question, and then for the roles of the panel. Every candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer the question and will be shown a signal by Connor.
Connor, can you raise your hand, please?
Very back. One hand will say you have 30 seconds left, and 2 hands will tell you you need to be done. Can we start by asking each candidate to state their name, the position they're running for, and where they live?
Also, if everyone could please silence your phone now. There's always one person. Make sure it's not you.
So if you start. Yeah.
Hi, I'm George Demko. I'm running for the Board of Ed. I'm an at-large candidate, so I would represent the whole county if I'm elected.
Good afternoon, I'm Dr. Bonnie Ennis. I too am running for one of the at-large seats for Wycomico County Public Schools, and I'm a lifelong resident of Wycomico County.
We should tell you that you can vote for both of us.
Yes,
because they're
me
two
too. One of two.
And I'm Karen Miller, and I am running for the seat in District 2. And I'm not a lifelong resident of Wycomico County, but it is my home, and my children graduated from school here, and I taught here. So I have a vested interest in our schools.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Allen. I am running for Wycomico County Council at Large. I am also a lifelong county resident, currently residing in Salisbury.
I'm Nira Boda. I'm the Vice President of Salisbury City Council running for Wycomico County Executive. I live in Salisbury and have lived on the Eastern Shore for most of my life.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a pre-submitted question, but to ask the question, if you just raise your hand, when asking the question, please state your name and what candidate or candidates you would like to answer. Please remember that the candidates only have 1.5 minutes to answer, and you may ask one follow-up question pertaining to your original question. So if they say something and you want them to clarify or anything like that, you can ask them to. So our first question was submitted by Susan Demis, and she would like to ask Muir and Megan, what is your position on the recent approval and construction in Wycomico County of a 3 million gallon waste storage tank, otherwise known as DAF, and the trucking of this DAF waste in from other states for storage and then application to land?
We'll start with Muir.
One of the most important things, I think, whether it's farmers or whether it's any of us, is to be a good neighbor. And, one of the things I do talk about is property rights and protecting each other's properties, but it's what you do on your property and how it affects your neighbor. That's the issue we have here. And I think the county council and the county missed an opportunity where they could have done a better job at designating where these should be. But it doesn't fix the current problem with the one that's affecting people's quality of life, where they can't even enjoy their back porch on an evening when this thing is raging. So I think there is a missed opportunity here to address it and then put it and place these in the proper location.
Thank you. Megan?
So I actually agree with Mr. Bodo over here. I think from the beginning, an issue with language is definitely what happened here at the county council. Some of the language when it comes to zoning policy definitely should have been addressed from the very beginning. I was actually very lucky to sit in on actually all of the county council conversations regarding the DAF tanks. I was able to hear firsthand a lot of the residents who were personally impacted by these DAF tanks. I was able to talk to one of the residents who specifically said that she lives miles away from this DAF tank and has had chronic migraines since it was installed and has, really impeded her quality of life. Just to agree there, this is something that should have been addressed from the very beginning. I think that the time frame at which the county addressed this has a major issue. 3 years is far too long. A lot of our stakeholders in the county, a lot of our residents felt very frustrated that their concerns were not being addressed, not even just at all, but in a timely manner. So thank you.
Okay, does anybody have a question they'd like to submit at this point?
So both of you, how long have these things been in place compared to the homes? Is this an old process?
Here, it's recent. I used to live on Bragg's Lane outside of Hubbard, near where this is.
Right.
And this was 20 years ago, and they weren't there. So this is something that's happened within the past 3 or 4 years, and so there was really nothing in the code specifically for this type of tank.
And obviously nothing to stop it.
Yes.
So the county council this month did impose a ban on these tanks moving forward, but it does address an overall issue that we are not proactively looking at the new technologies that are coming into this county and adjusting our policies and zoning to be mindful of this new technology. So though it's not an issue moving forward, a lot of the current projects have been grandfathered in. Personally, long-term focus for me is just making sure that we're mindful and proactive about the language in our zoning.
There's also a follow-up question for this first one submitted both of the council candidates. Do you agree with the council's recent decision on DAF tank? They recently passed legislation to limit them. Do you agree with the council's decision? What are your thoughts?
I agree with that they should be limited. There was an option that I think Council President Cannon had identified where it found a couple of spots in the county where it didn't impact any creeks or streams. There was no residential around them, and it was almost isolated. I think that was a good solution for where they should go, but it failed to address the one that's here causing the problems. And so we just do this grandfathering sometimes on issues, and it doesn't address the issue. It just stops anybody else from adding more, but it doesn't do anything for the people who are still going to have quality of life of issues because this thing's still going to be in use.
Yeah, and I actually agree with the ban that was put forth by our current county council members, mainly because the technology right now with DAF is in the process of being outdated. We have other technologies coming to the county that pretty much do a very similar process but avoid the smell nuisance that a lot of the residents complained about. So I was very happy with the decision. Like I mentioned, a number of county residents came forward. We had multiple packed houses, multiple nights throughout the month of residents coming forward saying that this was a concern, that they were frustrated by these tanks. So I'm glad that the county took those comments into hand and put a ban on these tanks.
So I'm sorry, I'm Dean Geiger, the cost. Has anybody said, here, let us come forward and help you change this process? We'll donate to eliminate this instead of just complaining about it. Anybody trying to help them out?
So
Locally or even from the government? Are we going to do something to help them change this process?
change what process specifically?
The DAF.
To eliminate the odors, it seems to be the concern. You say there's new processes, so who wants to help them change? The people that are complaining?
Purdue has a new process on a plant that they're looking at to open in Seaford.
No, I'm talking about the one that's existing, it's a problem.
So unfortunately, that project is is a DAF tank. It's using that specific type of technology. But moving forward, we can apply those new technologies to the new tanks. And that's what the unfortunate thing about the grandfathering is it does not address the current tanks that are causing the issues in the county right now.
So there's nothing, I'm sorry, Paul, about, there's nothing on the books right now to get them to clean the tank up, change the technology.
From the conversations I've had with some of the council members, no. Now, mind you, I'm not in some of the intimate conversations that council members are having amongst themselves, so, hopefully when I'm elected, I'm given privy to some of that more in-depth information. It's been brought up in passing conversation that they want to address this a little bit further from community conversations, but nothing that indicated that the county is going to take further steps.
Okay, we are going to ask a school board question now. So this would be for Karen, George, and Bonnie. And it was submitted by someone who wanted to just be known as a retired Wacomico County educator. And they want to know, what are your proposed strategies for handling the student behavior issues?
George, we'll start with you.
It is a problem. I mean, I've talked to several teachers, and they say it's bad, and it's gotten worse since COVID. We heard this week that one teacher at Bennett Middle ended up in the hospital trying to break up a fight. There have been other incidents, not a lot, but there have been a few other incidents. We have SROs in all the middle schools and all the high schools, but the SROs can't be everywhere, and I don't want them to be everywhere. I think the first thing I would do, and we may try to do this even before the election, I think we're going to try to sit down with a group of teachers and get their suggestions. Because I hear the teachers complain, but I haven't really received suggestions. Perhaps, I don't know, a panic button that you get some help there quickly. I don't know, I don't have the answers, but I think if we sit down and discuss it with a group of the people involved, and I'm not talking about the administrators, because the complaint I hear is that they don't get administrative support. So I'd like to sit down with a group of teachers who are affected by this and see what their suggestions are.
I think the first thing that you have to consider is what is causing the behavior. Is it a mental health issue? Is the behavior something that needs to be addressed with mental health, or is it an issue of true chronic behavior problems with the students? I see at the elementary level that there are several students who have not yet recovered from that isolation of COVID, and they are still struggling with how to behave in an instructional environment. I see at the middle school level those students who are still struggling with being held accountable within a classroom for their work. And I see at the secondary level the behavior is caused because they're not being held accountable for attendance. And so those attendance issues play into it. So I think before you can come up with a plan, and there is not a one-size-fits-all for this, is you have to determine from where is that particular issue coming from. Is it mental health, or is it a chronic behavior problem based on the isolation and based on the fact that these students have not yet reacclimated themselves to an instructional environment? Thank you.
As a middle school math teacher, I can tell you that behaviors, and this is borne out by the
If we could just flip the tone. Okay,
and this is borne out by the figures that Dr. Stauffer shared at the beginning of the year. Discipline referrals start to rise in 5th grade. They reach their peak in middle school, and they don't start to come back down until after 9th grade. So that the grades between 5th and 9th grade are peak referral times for students, peak disruptive behavior time for students. I think if you talk to any middle school teacher, we already knew that. We've been saying that for years. So definitely we need some kind of program to address it. Things that we've done in the past haven't worked. Many times teachers feel like administration pushes it under the rug to avoid having the numbers. And then there's the fact that Wacomico County was sued by the Justice Department for how we handle the behavior. So we do need to take a long look at what is causing the problems. And it needs to involve bringing parents into the school and getting them more active and providing more health care for the students. And that's something that we are starting to do. We are starting to get more money for social workers and mental health. But it's a big picture, and we need parents on board to help with that. as well as teachers. Sorry.
You have 2 hands.
I know, I saw these.
Go ahead.
Just, I would like to remind the panelists and you over there that this is a place where you're going to need to speak up. They have acoustical tiles, and it's a firehouse, and I would like to hear what you have to say today rather than watch Pack 14, because I know they're getting it. Thanks.
Keep that in mind. Does anybody have any follow-up questions or separate questions? And if you think of one at any time while we're asking other questions, just raise your hand. Okay, a number of people have asked this question for everyone, and it is, will you accept the results of this election?
So, you, George?
Yes.
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 Perfect.
No controversy?
There you go. Any follow-up questions to that? Any questions from the audience? Go ahead.
I think it's for the council, but if I'm in the wrong ballpark, let me know. There's a lot of trailers out here, abandoned trailers, people living in trailers. I thought it was a 3-month limit. What's with all the abandoned trailers and how do we get rid of these things?
To be honest, that's actually the first time I've heard of this, and I'd love to deep dive into it a little bit more with you, maybe separately after the forum. Yes, please, please. And that's what I'm loving about this. My campaign has been I'm very transparent about where my expertise is, but a lot of what candidates need to do is engage with the community, because you guys are at the forefront of a lot of what's happening, so I'm really big on communication. All of my literature has my phone number and email address, by the way, so please take it in the back, and if there's anything that pops up, before the election, after the election, regardless of if I win, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to work with you and help, tackle some of these issues.
Right, I have one on my road and I just left, and so there's nothing going on. It's an eyesore, it's obviously unkept, there's garbage, it needs to go. I know about 10 others.
Is this on a specific lot, or is this just on?
So it's not on the side of the road, it's in a lot specifically?
Correct.
Okay.
So are they
Along
hooked
with
up?
a tractor-trailer truck body, which I understand we're not supposed to have either. Those need to go too.
But it looks like people just either buy a lot or just find a lot, and they'll move a camper in. Sometimes they'll get electricity and water, sometimes they don't, and live there a while. When they get tired of living there, they disappear.
One of the things that is missing from the county, and in the city, we've done this. First, I would bring back what's called the public information officer, which was an individual whose job was to basically be the communication liaison between the government and all the communities and towns around the county. The other thing that I would do is create kind of like a citizen reporter site, where if there is an issue, such as abandoned trailers or potholes or area where there's people can go in, and it uses the GIS system, so you would put the address in, the issue, and it would pop it in and create a ticket. So it would route it to the appropriate department. If it's not done within a certain period of time or no response, then it gets escalated to the administration to get involved. So that's something that I think, as far as communication between the community and the government, that we can do to help bring up issues that we might not necessarily know about, even though it's known down here. But it's, that's what these forums are for, is to find other issues that are happening throughout the county.
Thank you.
Beverly Black Dog, I guess it's more for the council members. Do you have any update on fiber optics when it might make it down here? Or past the fire hall? We heard it was going to go as far as the fire hall, and most of our population is past the fire hall.
Candidates, this also ties into another question we got that asked, how will you improve the internet situation out here? So,
Yeah.
Well, the along with that, as I refer to it as the pink elephant sitting in the back corner of the room is water and sewer. And so we know that it's going to have to be done, so we're going to have to dig everything up. So my suggestion is while we dig everything up, let's run utility conduit so that we can run fiber optic. And if you get 2 or 3 companies that are offering service, that's great. That's great for you because you get good service and you get competition, which means, you know, like in my situation, Comcast is the only game in town. They can charge you whatever they want. And so if you have competition with that, it'll keep the prices low. So I believe we should do it when, you know, during that process.
And the process you're referring to is water and sewer?
Implementation of water and sewer.
Okay, water and sewer down here is going to change the whole dynamics of this whole community.
Yes.
When will that come?
Well, I don't want it to come.
Well, you're going to be in a situation where if you try to go sell your house or your property and it doesn't pass, that's what's happening now. People are trying to sell their properties. And because if it's too much density, you know, and as the state of Maryland is reducing what's considered dense to perk, you're going to have trouble selling the property.
I won't.
Well, I mean, you know, if you live, if you have plenty of land, but in some of the other areas, they're not in that situation.
Right.
Right. But the others of us will have to suffer, so.
And you think we're all gonna have to pay the burden for this, price-wise, taxes?
Well, it's not taxes, it's a fee for service. So it's run separately from, it's run as what they call an enterprise fund. So everything that is all the grants, all the funds that go to operate the water and sewer, it's all run in a separate fund by itself.
Will
almost like
everybody
it's
be
a-
required to hook in?
Only after you fail.
Yeah,
I would expect.
yeah. Once things start failing, then they will. Or what'll happen is the health department will condemn the property.
There's a question in the back and then a question over
Can
here.
I say something about the communication system?
Sure.
It's my understanding that the county has signed a contract with a company called Talkie Communications, and they have begun building internet access on the east side. So within the next year, as I understand it, they will be building that system on the east side, and after that, they will come to the west side. Some people were opposed to this Talkie Communications and very nervous about them. They wanted Shop Tank to do it, but council made this decision, is my understanding, and it's going forward with that.
While we're on the topic of utilities and such, my question is there anything on the agenda for improving cellular service in the area? That's a big issue. Just there's miles and miles driving down through here where there's zero communication, and you know that's a big safety issue in my opinion.
Before you all answer, do you mind sharing your name and please?
I'm Cynthia Atkins.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this kind of combines into this big broader question that I've been raising throughout my entire campaign of updating our infrastructure. So that is broadband, water and sewer, internet access, cellular access. There are a lot of areas still in this community that are just deserts when it comes to resources like that. Currently, I can't answer to specifically what's slated on the council's agenda just because I'm not on it quite yet. And they don't only really give their agendas that far out in advance. I know based off the conversations that I'm having with the current councilman, there is an interest in expanding that. I would love to see some more of that kind of infrastructure expansion. I think there's an opportunity for us to address a lot of the infrastructure issues we're having while still retaining a lot of that rural culture that you reference. But I do see that a lot of these outer edge communities here in Wicomico are kind of facing this issue with crumbling infrastructure. And there's a way for us to make sure that you guys are getting the resources that you need so that we can continue to thrive in this community and continue to have long-lasting, new life flowing into these without it being the metropolis that I feel like some of you guys fear coming out this way. So I can say for myself, I'm very interested in bringing that discussion to the council as to if it's being slated currently. Quite mature. Thank you.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, with it, wherever you put in a system for water and sewer, it's going to have a maximum growth capacity, and it's also going to have, a limited area that it's going to serve. And how we don't want, and a lot of people probably don't want growth all the way down here. I think it affects the rural culture of this area, and so you do that by zoning. You set it up to be zoned a certain way, and that's, we're not going to, there was fear with running water from the city of Salisbury out to the airport that now we're going to have all this development along there, but we explained to them it's a closed line. The way that this system is set up to go to the airport is a closed line. It's not designed to be tapped into. So there are things you can do along the way if you have to do a long stretch. That it's a closed line. It's not set up to be tapped into, and you don't want to tap into those. So that's kind of the how we do the systems and what they're there to serve. But the other issue with it is the fewer people you have on a system, the more it costs to each of the users. So that's the only other thing when you have to do it. So.
We had a question over here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Peggy Lafferty. I have a question for everyone, a little different, more general. And I know that you're not in the positions right now. And aside from you being re-elected in the future, how will you be accountable for your position? So my question is about accountability, and how will you be accountable aside from, like I said, us re-electing you? How do you see yourself being accountable for your position?
I guess I'll address that first, if that's okay. I think my overall goal is to raise the student success rate for all students. And the way I measure that success rate is by improving the graduation rate. Right now, the graduation rate is between 82 and 83%. The state average is 87 to 88%. I think, excuse me, Talbot County, for example, they had the same situation as we do currently have. And they have raised theirs to 95%. So I think I will be judged if we can raise it to at least 90%. That's my overall goal.
Great.
As a classroom teacher, I always held myself accountable for my job and for making sure that my students were getting the best instruction that they could get. As an administrator, I feel like I did the same thing. As a potential council member, I would hope that the community that voted for me would hold me accountable, as well as myself holding myself accountable for the votes that I take, for the positions that I take on anything. But like Mr. Demko, student achievement, raising the student achievement in Wycomico County, raising the attendance rate, raising the graduation rate. Those are all things that we need to keep in front of the community. We do not need to be hiding data. We do not need to be soothing data. We need to make sure that we are held accountable by sharing information with the community. We need to make sure that you know the graduation rate. If those academic achievement scores rise, if attendance increases, we are sure to see graduation rates rise. And so I think we have to hold ourselves accountable, but I also hope that the community holds us accountable.
One of the things that I surprised myself by enjoying the most about this campaign so far was knocking on doors. I've probably knocked on over 1,500 doors by now in District 2. Yeah, it's my new hobby. And I will tell you that's one way that I hope I can stay accountable. I have learned so much about what the people in my district want and the things that they're concerned about. And I hope that the fact that I've knocked on so many doors lets those people know I am available. I have not always gotten answers to my questions when I emailed the board, but I promise you, you will get one from me. Always. Whether you like the answer or don't, I will give you the best answer I can give. When I look at the problems that we have, I know it's about dealing with middle school discipline or behaviors. I know it's about getting kids to come to school ready to learn. I know it's about getting parents to feel that they're a part of schools again. Many of the parents I've talked to don't seem to understand that. So it's about transparency and open communication. And that's what I did as a classroom teacher. It's the only way I know how to be. So I will continue being that way.
So for me, accountability is only possible with transparency. And that's something that kind of was the encouraging factor for me to run, is the lack of transparency we're currently seeing at the county level. So my entire campaign at the forefront has been to be as accessible as I can be to all of my constituents. I have tried to be in every single district, touch base with every single community leader, municipality leader, and I intend to do that once I'm elected and continue that level of engagement, keeping an open door dialogue between community, residents, the leaders of this whole county, and really letting them know what my priorities are going to be. You know, once I kind of get a fuller picture of what the county has planned for the year, what I would love to see at the county level, and just letting you guys know, month by month, having a quarterly check-in, I feel like is really what I feel like this county needs. A lot of our current county council candidates don't do regular check-ins with their community, and it took me months of deep diving into a lot of documents and a lot of back-end channels on the county webpage to find out just what our council has been doing for the past year. And the average person doesn't have the time, or honestly sometimes the desire, to dive into finding all that information out. So making that transparent about the work that we're doing at the county, and also making it more accessible just by having these kind of conversations on a more regular basis.
And I agree with everyone here. I mean, it's about communication, and it's about the county regularly having forums like this, whether it's an election year or not. That's critical to hear directly from members of the community. And the other piece is she alluded to it, the county website is horrendous. Try to find something on there is, and I don't even know where, I guess you can find it occasionally, is the briefing book. So when we put our agenda up, it's the entire briefing book of everything that's in there. I have a hard time finding it on the county's website, and it's you see the agenda, that doesn't tell me what the legislation says. So, and at the one DAF council meeting when they were talking about the DAF tanks, there was legislation on the table, and everybody thought that's what they were going to pass. No, that was the suggested amendment to and it was confusion. Nobody knew what was going on, and I think that sometimes you can't, in those situations, you can't create confusion. You have to be straightforward and be direct with what you're doing, because confusion that just causes chaos, and we don't need any more chaos.
Before we jump to the next question, one thing I'd like to say on behalf
Louder,
of
Jared.
Before we jump on to the next question, you can hear me now. Organizations like ours are very committed to, and I'm sure all these candidates can attest that we will definitely make sure that if you are not doing your job, we will definitely come along our organization isn't just showing up to Podval to do this town hall and then never coming back. We definitely, if there's any issues and ways we can be helpful, because sometimes the candidates need a little push, and we will gladly be that push. I'll take over your meeting now. Yeah, I saw a hand here.
Oh wow, there's 3 hands. Okay. Okay.
On the issue of the website, who runs the website? The county website?
The IT department.
Which I think folks.
The IT department.
which I think goes back to you mentioning a public information officer would be fantastic to have. It would just ease that communication line and just break down that barrier that's currently existing between the community and the county government right now.
Yeah, it was a great website 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah,
But
how many
things
people-
have changed on the internet since they've developed it, and I think there's some better, more responsive formats to use.
Yeah, so that, how many people are in the IT department, do you know?
I think there's like 4 or 5.
Who do they report to?
The IT director reports to the county executive.
Okay. Who's the IT director?
Offhand, I don't know the name. I know that Bill Garrett is the guy for the city, and he's great. So maybe I'll bring him over. Or maybe I shouldn't say so.
There are many county vacancies, as you probably know, so they may not even have an IT director at this point, who knows?
Did you have a question?
I do. So, for those who don't know me, which is all those people up there do, and some of you out here do, I'm Kel Nagel, and I am not a native of the Eastern Shore, but I have lived here 44 years, which is more than most people who live in Wycomico County now, because we're all under 44. So, I was president of the Wycomico County Board of Education from 1984 to 1995. We got a few things done. I occasionally wandered into classrooms and intimidated teachers. I won't say who they were.
I should interrupt and say that his child was in Bonnie's class.
Bonnie had my son when he was in 5th or 6th grade. He's now old. But Bonnie didn't. Anyway, and full disclosure on George's campaign trail. Poor George. So, my biggest thing in 11 years, president of the school board, and the 2 years I was an outside agitator, was getting adequate funding for our schools. It was a problem then, and it's a problem now. At the county executive forum held at Holloway Hall a couple weeks ago, one of the candidates for county executive, who shall remain nameless, but she is a teacher, supposedly, said you can't solve problems by throwing money at them. That is a conservative saw I have heard forever, and I have responded the same way every time. When problems need money, you can't solve them without money. Now, first for the school board candidates, and then for the county official candidates, we are about to receive an influx of a lot of money, so-called Kirwan Commission money. So, school board candidates, what is the best way to use the money now? County council and county executive candidates, will you support proper spending and meeting maintenance of effort and doing what is financially necessary to get the improvements in our schools that we need? Nice speech, huh?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jan.
Yes, so we have as you probably know, in this county, we have a 2% revenue cap. That means the revenues cannot increase, as I understand it. It's very complicated, but as I understand it, that means our revenues cannot increase more than 2% any budget year. Okay? It's not a tax cap, it's a revenue cap. So if it doesn't increase more than 2%, property values increase more than 2%, your tax rates go down, which is good, but it doesn't help the school situation. Sometimes we haven't even funded up to the 2% revenue cap. And we may not be able to get rid of that 2% revenue cap. I wish we could, but it's probably not politically feasible for the county council. I don't know, but we have to at least fund up to that revenue cap, and sometimes we haven't. What I would do with that money, I think there are 5 different categories within Kirwan. It's called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. If you want to look it up online, it's a very detailed blueprint. I can't remember all the details, but I think the highest priority in there is, 2 things. Pre-K, expanding pre-K all day for 3 and 4-year-olds, and also expanding CTE opportunities for students who otherwise would drop out of school because they don't think they have a future in high school. CTE is, what's it called?
Career
Something in technical
technology.
education. Career and technical education, or career pathways is another term for it.
So I think the 5 pillars of the Maryland Blueprint are very specific on how those funds can be spent. And as Mr. Demko mentioned, the pre-K, certainly full funding for our pre-K enrollment, our students are, but you have to remember, when you add a classroom, you have to find a classroom. And, you can get a teacher, you can get materials, but you have to have some place to put those students. And so I think that while we have this funding coming toward us, it is not for building schools. It is for science of reading, which is looking at reading through how the brain learns. So that is a sort of it's a small shift for Wycomico County since some of those pieces were already in place. But looking at the science of reading, funding for that through the blueprint, funding for the pre-K, funding for teacher professional development. The funding from the blueprint is very specific. And yes, we do have a 2% revenue cap in Wycomico County. However, there is a way that the 2% revenue cap can be exceeded for education. And so what I would like to know is would our county executive, would our county council be open to exceeding that 2% revenue cap for the purposes of education, should that need arise? In the 20 years that it's been in place, it has not been exceeded. Yes,
sorry,
I'm done.
So keeping in mind, as Bonnie said, you can't house classrooms where you don't have physical buildings to put them in. So we are limited by the infrastructure that we've got. We can, however, expand pre-K to the limit that we have classrooms. We've already mentioned the behavior issues from grades 5 through 9. So clearly that's an area that if we can reach those children, we can make huge strides. If we can reduce the behavior problems, if we can increase the attendance rate in that group right there, you're going to change graduation rates. Because once kids start getting in trouble, they start getting suspended, they start falling even further behind. So if we focused on that, in particular with social services and tutoring, then we might reach some of those kids that are acting out of the frustration. The other thing is, if we look at the kids at the elementary level, often you can identify a child by 3rd grade who is falling behind, and that child, when they get to middle school, surprise, 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 becomes a behavior problem. So if we can really target those students and work on the social and emotional skills to help prevent that acting out, I think we'd make a big difference in their overall behavior.
It's a big topic in such a small span of time.
Yeah.
I've seen these guys talk on this topic for 30 minutes and still not answer fully the question. So Cal, your question specifically for the county council was, would I support their budget specifically? Absolutely, especially if these 3 make it onto the board. Like I mentioned,
The budget will be lower if these 3 don't.
I'm a big fan of following the experts in their field. I know where my roadhouse is, and that's really an environmental policy and government work, and very little from the environmental sector. So if these guys are telling us the resources that we need here in the county, absolutely going to listen to them. I will also have hopefully a fantastic relationship with the current county executive, and kind of having full-on discussions about what I can do at the county council to advocate for the Board of Education and what the county executive may need from the county council to get that through.
So the way that I view the role of the county executive is your main job, day-to-day job, is general services. The day-to-day operations of the county, parks, roads, that's the main role. It's not the job of the county executive to micromanage the Board of Education. We have a duly elected school board. That's their job. The job of the county executive with the school board is partnership. It's defining and finding out what are the needs, what do they view the needs as, and it's, you know, the revenue cap. You know, it's been a blessing and a curse. I think overall, you know, why we have it. You know, it was taxes were raised 14%, and you know, I know people up in Talbot County, they had a similar situation who for generations lived near the water, and then all of a sudden their tax bills are extraordinary, and I know people that lost farms and lost homes. There's a fly.
Right here.
That's, so, sorry. So I think revenue cap overall is good, but like they said, there is an exception that can be used when education is necessary. And and I think that's where you partner with the Board of Education and the County Council and get consensus when we have to do it. You know, and we might, if you look at
That's time.
teacher salaries.
Like I said, big issue.
And fly.
Okay, this is the Board of Education. I have no kids in the system, but I have heard that for the most part, teachers are required to teach to the test, to teach to the whatever. There is no real room for any outside things. If it's this particular time of day, they better be cutting this, and if it's particular, you know, that type of thing. I can remember back in 6th grade, I mean, this is one of these things, a teaching moment that you remember. It started snowing. The teacher realized that we had a kid who had just moved up here from Texas. He had never seen snow before. She stopped the classroom, we all put our jackets on, we went outside so that we could see the elation of this particular student. I mean, he'd never, ever seen snow before. That type of thing, I understand, can't even take place because it is so minuscule as to where everybody has to be on every given day. Is there any flexibility in the teaching so that teachers can have a teaching moment? Or just, you know, some days kids just don't want to learn, you know, or they're just not having a great day. Will you offer them the flexibility to be able to just say, hey, let's just get up and dance, you know, or something, just to let off steam?
I'll start, I guess. I was never a classroom teacher. I was an ESL teacher, so I taught small groups of kids, and I haven't done that for about 15 years. But that teaching to the test was a problem even back then. You have a curriculum, a state-mandated curriculum. As I understand it, the county decides what materials will be used to satisfy that curriculum. So the county has some flexibility in designing that curriculum. But I don't know, maybe Bonnie or Karen has a better, more current insight. Bonnie just retired this year. She may have more current insight into the question of teaching to the test.
Part of my job for the last 18 years has been observing our non-tenured teachers. And so going into the classrooms and seeing what they're teaching, how they're teaching, that is what I have been doing for the last 18 years. And so I would like to believe, and I do believe, that it is possible for those teachable moments throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year. I do not believe that our teachers are held accountable for a day-to-day script of here's what you have to teach on this day. We have a scope and sequence because, you know, with the test coming up, we want to make sure that the students are exposed to the instruction that they need for that particular assessment to get an idea of where they are and what remediation, if any, is needed. But I have not seen any document that says on Monday you must do this and say this. On Tuesday you must do this and say this. Instead, what I do see is, okay, this is Unit 1 and it should be between September 19th and November 30th. And then during that time, it is the teacher's purview to make those decisions on what she does, or he does, on a daily basis with those students. And I'd like to believe that that is happening at every level. My observations were limited to elementary and middle school, but I would still like to believe that that is available to all teachers at all grade levels in all subjects.
Okay, show of hands, how many of you loved math in middle school? Okay, so I taught middle school math, and I'll be honest, I hated math in middle school. True story, failed high school algebra. But I taught math for 15 years at Bennett Middle School, and I loved every minute of it because I looked for those teachable moments. So throughout my career, I did hear that we were teaching to the test, and I never actually had the experience of feeling like I was teaching to the test. It's important that our school administrators and our content supervisors give teachers the freedom to use those teachable moments, because you're not going to reach kids if you're just teaching to the test, and definitely not to reach them in math. So good teaching is about finding teachable moments, and the best thing that we can do is find ways to make our teachers be good teachers. That's where the magic of education lies, is having a teacher who can bring the subject to life, and those teachable moments are it.
Am I mistaken, or was there some thought, or is the internet just got me confused? They were going to eliminate some of these SAT tests because they spend so much time preparing them instead of doing the regular.
I do know that some universities are no longer requiring SATs for entrance scores. I do not know that for certain as to which universities, but I had heard that there were some that were no longer requiring the SAT. For us, we still administer the SAT. It is strictly, one of those things that is voluntary for the students. And so I can't say for certain who is eliminating it and why they're eliminating it, but I had heard that some universities were no longer taking that score.
I'm still Cal, still third, still in the name on. Following up on just one point that Mr. Boda made about the function of the county executive. The county executive does determine the budget for the county's contribution to the school board that will go to the county council, which can't increase it, but can decrease it. Some people are not aware that the Wycomico County Board of Education and its superintendent of schools do not report to the county council at all. They are agencies of the state government. They report to the State Board of Education and superintendent. Isn't that interesting? So we can blame those guys. Now following up on something that Karen started on but ran out of time. Yeah, you. And I'm taking your time here. She alluded to using some of the Kerwin money to look at the social and emotional needs of the children who are getting into trouble, who are progressing to fighting the disciplinary problems, being suspended, dropping out, and becoming, school shooters or whatever when they're 20. So some of your opponents, who I won't name, are using the phrase SEL, social emotional learning, as some sort of bugaboo which we should be opposed to. They say, oh, it interferes with the parents' responsibilities, and we have all these kids at home who have one or zero parents in the household, parents who are busy working, parents who have whatever problems they have. Everybody has problems. How can we use the actual tools of social emotional learning to identify kids that need help and get that help? And who do we have to hire with our Kerwin money to do it?
And we'll start with Karen on that, because
yeah, that's my plan.
Well, from my understanding, we're hiring more social workers. And I'm happy to say that my oldest daughter is now a social worker in Baltimore City Schools. And so one of the ways that you identify students is something we already have in our buildings. And I sat on the committee that looked at children who have behavior problems. And we track those kids throughout the year, and we actively try to work with them to reduce their behavior problems. So we already have pieces of that puzzle in school. How you convince people that social emotional learning is a good thing when they've decided that it's not, I don't think some of those people you can convince. They've decided they want to believe a certain thing, much as this guy in Pennsylvania wants to outlaw pole dancing Pennsylvania schools. And I can tell you they didn't do that when I was in school there. So, I mean, we can say an elephant is a rhinoceros, but it's not. And I'm not going to waste time arguing with people who believe it is. The bottom line is, I think we can all agree that if you've got children that are disrupted in the classroom, everybody else's learning is impacted by it. And the other thing we can agree is that they are children. And children are not mini adults. We can't say if they do the crime, they should serve the time. They're children. It's our job to educate our children. And one of the ways we sometimes have to educate them is how to handle their feelings and how to handle their emotions and how to handle their...
You got 2 hands this time. I hate cutting you guys off.
It's a long answer. I mean, it really is a long answer.
You have to get past that stigma of what SEL actually means. You know, we've had programs like the Second Step program in Wycomico County for the last 10, 15 years. This is not something that is new. What is new are the number of new problems that have escalated. And I hate to keep blaming the pandemic, but I'm going to blame the pandemic for the isolation that our students felt for those 2 years. And so we have hired additional social workers in Wycomico County. We have hired additional pupil personnel workers in Wycomico County. We have hired additional guidance counselors. But I do believe that we need a district approach to this. The schools need the district support. And so if perhaps a district team of social workers and guidance counselors, community, whatever the case may be, that could then meet with the school to determine the needs of a particular student or the family itself and what the district can help the school with so that it doesn't just fall on the individual schools for their issues. Got one hand.
So this is not a new phenomenon, social emotional learning, nor is it a harmful phenomenon. You know, they've created this seemingly new monster. We turned it into this seeming monster. As I said at a previous forum, I taught 15 years ago, 3rd or 4th grade, we had a little reader for the kids, involving the friendship between Jackie Robinson and Pee Wee Reese. I was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan as a child, so I really loved that book. But it was about how Pee Wee Reese was the captain of the Dodgers, befriended Jackie Robinson in his first year in the major leagues because he knew he was not going to be able to survive in some of these hostile environments. So it was how this friendship formed and how it developed and how you could have friendships between, you know, different groups. And I think that's a perfect example of what social emotional learning should be. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
On that topic, we have received the question, how will you address the rise in extreme ideology trying to influence the school board? For instance, banning books, culture wars, CRT.
Could you say that again?
Sorry, okay. How will you address the rise in extreme ideologies trying to influence the school board, such as banning books, culture wars, etc.?
Those are multiple questions. I guess I'll start with CRT. Let me start with banning books. Okay. I'm against banning books. I think parents can ban books from their kids. I'm not in favor of schools banning books. Different kids have different needs. And, but, you know, when my kid was a 10-year-old or 12-year-old, I can't remember, I found a Playboy under his bed. And, you know, I took it away from him, but in retrospect, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. I don't know. But anyway, I think parents are the ones who can, parents and guardians, I should say, because not all of these kids have lived with their parents. They may live with their grandparents, they may live with guardians. But I think those are the people who should be responsible for what their children read, not the school system. As far as CRT, I don't think it's an issue. I think we're a great country, we have a great history. We need to teach all of our history. We don't need to be ashamed of it. It's not about blaming anybody. It's about presenting our history honestly. Germany's been doing this since World War II. They have a horrible history, as you know, and they've been teaching their school children about that history since the 50s. And so they're not ashamed of it, and we're not here out to shame anybody. We're just out to, present our honest history so that somebody said, if you don't, how does it go? If you don't study your history, you're condemned to repeat it. You are condemned to repeat it. And I don't want us to repeat slavery or the Jim Crow era or anything that happened prior to the 60s.
The good news is that in Wycomico County, we already have a procedure for approving and for reviewing books that are questioned. We have a procedure. It's in place. And so the idea of banning a book because it approaches the sensibilities of someone, that should not be the reason to take a book out of a media center. Our students have access to the internet. Let's just soak that in. They have access to the internet. And we have a process for for reviewing books, for putting books in, for reviewing them, and I think that that is enough said on that. For CRT, most people have no idea what CRT even means. You could ask 5 people what CRT is, and you could get 4 or 5 different definitions. Critical race theory was never meant to be a part of curriculum. It was a journalistic piece published in the New York Times that the New York Times Education Department went ahead and started infusing into their curriculum resources, and all of a sudden it explodes. At no time should any student feel that they are to blame or that they are any way lesser than any other student based on history. And so that's enough said on that.
I will also, I agree with everything Bonnie said. I agree with everything George said. But I also throw out a question when we talk about whether books should be banned. Whose parent are you going to listen to?
Right.
Are we going to let the one parent who won't let their kid do anything? Are they the one that should make the decision? Do you remember when Harry Potter came out? So we have a procedure, and parents are involved in the procedure. Parents can read the books, students can read the book, teachers can read the books. We have a procedure. And the books that are in school libraries, if you don't want your child to read them, simply check and see what they're reading. Have the conversation. That's more important than whether the book is in the library or not. Talk to your children. That's where your power is. I can tell you as a kid, all you had to do was say a book was banned and I would find a way to read it. So I've been reading banned books since I was 13. That was the best way to get me to read a book. As far as CRT, again, it's not in our curriculum. There's no move to put it in our curriculum. It's not even part of any kind of curriculum outside of colleges. We have enough history, and our history continues. Every day is more history. We'll never get it all taught. But we should strive to teach as accurately as possible the history of America. We want to focus only on what's exceptional about America. But we need to focus on all of it.
If nobody has a follow-up question, I would like to get some for the county people here.
Oh yeah, Megan Muir is here.
Yeah.
I got the environmental stuff in the beginning.
So I want to try to include some of these questions that are more for this area. What as county candidates will you do to mitigate the destructive flooding in the area?
Neil, we'll start with you.
So with flooding, there's multiple, we have water tables rising, we have sea level rising, and so a lot of the infrastructure that we have throughout the county, throughout the municipalities, it's old. It was built 50 years ago, about the time I was born, if not before that. So as we are upgrading our infrastructure, and we've been doing this in Salisbury, is you're planning for resiliency. You're planning to, the 100-year flood is almost, we had 3 of those back to back in 3 years. And, when you drive by the city park and it's flooded, well, people forgot That's why the park's designed like that, because it's a floodable park. And that's one of the things we're doing with some of these parks in these areas, is that's where the excess water is supposed to go until it can run off. So as we're looking at throughout the county at some of the municipalities, where a lot of this is stormwater management, and working with them to, as they plan for their infrastructure projects, to be a partner and ensure they get every dollar they can to properly implement their stormwater management, because that's where the critical piece of it is with those storms.
So when it comes to the specifically, so when Mira mentioned resiliency, and to me that is kind of what I want to focus on the most when it comes to those types of issues. So during my time in offshore wind, I worked directly with the state of Delaware for an interconnection facility that was going to be coming in near Fenwick Park. And I got to work really closely with the Department of Natural Resources that they have up there, and I was able to realize that a lot of these floodplains, a lot of these areas are identified by the state years in advance. And the same thing is true for the state of Maryland. A lot of these areas that we are going to see a lot of 50 years, 20 years down the road disappear, that's already been mapped out. We know what's going to happen. So what we can do is bring the resilience into the planning at the county level, which means making sure our infrastructure is prepared for that type of flooding, making sure that our buildings are going to be up to code in that region, making sure that if something's been identified as, say, a transitional wetland area, that no more development is going to be put in that area, because we know what's going to happen with that region. So at the county level right now, I see it as we're only looking for 10 years down the road. I want it to be 20, 50 years down the road. We're looking at a long-term resiliency map, so that way our residents are protected for when these, floodings really start impacting the residential areas.
Any follow-up questions?
That's perfect.
Our next question is, again, for Megan and Muir.
There's a question in the back there.
Oh, I'm so
I have
sorry.
a question. It's not a follow-up question.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Okay. This question is from your Peggy Lockley again. I understand you are the budget, not you, but your position that you're running for is the budget guy. So you're the money man, so to speak. So I guess I have a twofold question. One is, what is your experience managing budgets, and how will you decide where the money for the county will go?
So 7 years on the Salisbury City Council, so I have 7 years of experience with government budgeting, being a part of that process, fighting for things, fighting against things. And the other piece, one of the things we started on the City Council was having the employee personnel committees from each of the areas of the city come to us before we even begin the budget process. So sometimes we hear some things from employees that have a concern with their day-to-day jobs. And then what might filter down from the department head, who the department heads typically write their own budgets. And then, in our situation, the mayor sends it back to them, usually goes back and forth. And that's the process I would follow, is working with the department heads, but also trying to connect with employees to see what are their needs from their perspective as well. So it's kind of a give and take there. I've also, for 28 years, I've been working at Walmart. The past 15, I've worked as the Asset Protection Operation Coordinator in that role, pretty much. And that's kind of like the CSO and CFO of a $100 million a year business. So I have the experience managing that in that environment, which is typically a fast-paced environment. So I kind of got it both from both worlds.
So as a
I'm watching the hand back there too. So.
Just as a follow-up to that question, if that's okay.
Sure.
The second part of my question was, how are you going to decide where the money goes in the county? How will you decide where that money goes?
So taking out the Board of Education, because I have complete confidence, especially in the 3 people that are here in this room. So partnership with the Board of Education and the superintendent on their priorities. So we set that aside. The other areas, such as Sheriff's Department, Clerk of the Court, State's Attorneys, it's partnership, because they're going to develop their budgets. And, you know, if we've got like a big trial coming up, Jamie Dykes might need additional monies for something. But as far as like everything else, life services come first. So anything, my approach has always been water, emergency services always comes first because you cannot play with people's lives. And so, you know, I have some ideas about emergency services and fire and EMS, which needs to be addressed long term. But when you get down to the critical piece of it, it's quality of life is mostly what we're managing. Our parks, our roads, and the other piece I would do is on the roads, we would have a system of rating the roads, worst to best. And you always address the worst road, no matter where it is. So that's how prioritizing funding, when you're talking about roads and stuff like that, you prioritize where's the need the most. And so that's kind of the approach that I would take.
Thank you. Actually, that leads perfectly into our next question. What is your plan to support fire departments and local first responders?
Oh,
Megan?
Yeah, so I have been lucky enough to have been approached by several of the volunteer fire departments in the county. It's become increasingly clear to me that these communities do not feel like they're getting the attention and resources that they need from the county level. First off, I would love to kind of create an open dialogue, as I've mentioned, that I hope to bring with me to the county council is really a constant door of communication with all the community leaders, and that is definitely going to continue with our emergency personnel, and making sure that they have the resources that they need, especially because our county relies on these volunteer men to serve the county. We do not really have the budget for a full-time, full-staffed, paid fire department service here in the county, so we're increasingly relying on these gentlemen to volunteer their time, volunteer their services, and each year they feel like they're receiving not only less volunteers are stepping up to take on the cause, but they're not getting the resources that they need for them to deliver quality and on-time services to their community. So to start off, just open door policy, figuring out exactly what they specifically need, and just make sure we maintain those conversations, you know, through the next 4 years that I would be serving.
My plan, and she alluded to, you know, the average age of the average firefighter is going up. Average number of recruits are going down. It's a lot to be a volunteer firefighter. It's a huge commitment as far as education, training, and time to serve, because they're required. So there's two pieces to it. First, I would set up a fire services commission, which would include our Chiefs Association, municipalities all around the county, and other areas of community interest, such as Pyaskin, Five Valve, Nanticoke in this area, to be a part of that conversation. And we've got a plan 25, 30 years down the road. What do we expect from fire service? What do we think is going to happen? And how do we get there? The other piece, when you look at EMS, which is the EMT and paramedic, which they are paid, each fire company in the county is on their own. And it's competition. And so they're competing with each other for EMTs and paramedics. And I think it's best if we take a look at the situation and have the county run the EMS piece. They're paid, they receive benefits, they receive retirement. The county manages the EMS billing, which is where a lot of the money comes for the operation. And then we still partner with the volunteer fire companies to do what they do best. Raise money, manage the equipment, and that's time.
Are there any follow-up questions?
Separate issue, right, it's a county question. How many county employees are there and what's the annual budget?
There's approximately between 400 and 500 county employees. They have probably about 90, 95 vacancies right now throughout the county, and in some critical positions. Budget for the county specifically is probably around $150 million a year.
Do they currently have an inspector general or an office of inspector general?
Not really. They do have a county auditor whose job is to like audit services and finances and stuff, but he's independent. I guess maybe that would count as it.
Yeah, I didn't know, and that was my question, what do you think it'd be worthwhile having one? Eventually, every county will, but, eventually this county will, but, you know, I don't know if the auditor issues published reports, you know, that are available on their website, you know, they,
I know the auditor sits at the county council meetings.
or,
I think when the county executive stopped going to the meetings, that's when they put the auditor in that chair.
Any follow-up questions? This was a question submitted by multiple people, and I'm sure it has affected at least someone in this room. And it is for everyone who, like, it fits, because I'm not even completely sure who is best to answer this question. What are your opinions on redistricting this school district so that children here currently slated to go to James M. Bennett High School would instead go to Mardella High School? And then it was mentioned that these people are currently putting their children on the bus as early as 5:30 in the morning.
Well, I could possibly take on that a little bit. And it's tricky because a lot of this districting really is not at this level here. It really starts at the state level, which is a little bit out of our control. However, as a personal comment, I will say, unfortunately, redistricting has become a big partisan issue. I don't believe it should be. I feel like the redistricting should be directly addressing the needs of the community. And for anyone who's followed the redistricting issues that happened here in Maryland, the reason why our primary election was pushed back so late is because of the redistricting issues we had here in Maryland. Really getting candidates in, getting at the state, and then again, this kind of it's above the scope of the panel, I believe here. Bringing in state candidates that will understand that redistricting shouldn't be a partisan issue anymore.
So if we look at school redistricting, the last time that school redistricting was done in Wycomico County was the late 1990s when Salisbury Middle School opened. And then it was just tweaked slightly to move those sixth graders to the middle school level. In that time, you need to take a look at how Wycomico County has changed. Where have all the new buildings emerged? Where is the population now? We have some schools that are overcrowded. We have some schools with empty classrooms. So to say that we're not going to talk about redistricting for Wycomico County, to me, would be irresponsible. I do believe that it is time to have a discussion. It will not be something that is popular, but I do believe that the time is now for that discussion to take place. And that will be an unpopular thing to happen in Wycomico County. But you cannot have students in small classrooms that were never designed to be a classroom while you have empty classrooms in other buildings. That's just not equitable.
It's not equitable in a lot of ways. It's not equitable for teacher workload either. When Bennett Middle opened up, we were immediately overpopulated. We had to expand the cafeteria for the first year that we were open. And meanwhile, Y Middle was under-enrolled. But it's never going to be a popular decision because people have decided this school is this way and that school is that way. True or not, for better or for worse, it has to happen. We do all of our students a disservice if we don't equitably distribute students so that classrooms, you don't have 30 children in a classroom that was never even meant to be a classroom. I'm thinking of one in particular at Bennett Middle right now that doesn't even have enough for 15, let alone the 30 that are in it. But it's going to take transparency. It's going to take a lot of parent input, but not everybody's going to be happy, but it needs to happen.
I'll say one more thing about the school redistricting. One thing we have to consider is that 10% of our students are English language learners, and 10% of our students are disabled. So that affects the number of students that various schools can accommodate depending on where these students are and how they could, because these students require special services. And there's a lot of concern that among the special needs parents that they're not presently getting those services. So the redistricting has to take that into account wherever you put these students.
Are there any?
When you talk about redistricting, what's affecting besides where your child goes to school? Are your council people, are you have represented by a different council?
So I will also add, I misunderstood the question and I was addressing state redistricting and county redistricting. So if I caused some confusion and that's why you're asking that question, they're strictly addressing school redistricting and my response was to county redistricting.
Okay, so the school redistricting only affects where your child goes to school.
And that really just affects where new developments have gone in, so that you have new population. So a lot of developments have gone in the Mardell area in the last 20 years that didn't used to be there, so their population is higher. So just patterns of where houses are built, and it's got to be adjusted for.
Or at least considered.
Yeah,
I think it's time for discussion.
long past time.
Are there any follow-up questions or separate questions? Okay, then I think we will allow everybody to, if you have one prepared, give your closing statement.
I would say for this, can we give them 2 minutes just so they can get their closing statement?
Instructions for the time person.
I won't take 2 minutes.
Since we started with George, I'm gonna mix it up and go with you.
Oh, wow, I wasn't even prepared for a 2-minute closing statement. No, I mean, this is an interesting election, and I know I'm stepping outside the normal paradigm of politics up here, running as a libertarian, and giving people another option, basically. And as an option, I've got 7 years of experience on the Salisbury City Council, 28 years of management experience, and in times managing hundreds of people in what they call complex retail environments. So I know how to manage people, I know how to get things done. I understand the process, and above all, my approach is one of partnership. One of partnership with the council, partnership with the Board of Education, partnership with other elected officials that are not directly under the auspice of the county executive. So that's the approach, and the ultimate goal is about serving you, the community. We are your public servants. We're not here for ourselves. And the number one focus is we enjoy the life that we have here in Wacomico County in the Eastern Shore, and it's our job is to protect that and make it, and leave everything that we've received to the next generation better than we received it. So, thank you.
No, we're just going down the line?
Yeah,
Great.
just going down the line.
So I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I personally believe that our county will thrive only when the community decides to take a step into local government. Local elections to me matter more than any other election you will probably ever vote for. These are people who will dictate your day-to-day life. So thank you all. I really want to see a little bit more engagement, hopefully moving forward. Again, as a first-time candidate, I know a lot of you have, this has been a big learning curve for me. And also just to get my name out there. A lot of you maybe don't know who I am. I'm from the Fruitland side of town, so up until recently, very rarely did I come down into the Bivalve region of places. But it's been a true joy getting to know each and every district at large. As an at-large candidate, I've had to hit every single pocket of this county. I've met some fantastic people along the way. I'll let it pass real quick, if that's okay. I've met some fantastic people along the way. I've learned about a lot of key issues that were referenced even here today that I wasn't aware of, and I think that's due to the level of engagement that I'm bringing here as a candidate. My sole reason for running was because I was frustrated with the lack of engagement I was seeing from our current county councilman. As I mentioned, I am big on community involvement, and that really starts with our leaders. I believe that they should be leading the way with that engagement. So really wanting to create an open door dialogue. I want you guys to know me personally, want to get on a first name basis with all of you. And again, like I mentioned, feel free on the back of this, my phone number, my personal cell, and my email address. So if there's ever an issue that pops up, if there's something that is happening in your district that's concerning to you, please feel free to reach out to me, okay? Thank you.
Will I make it another time?
Never.
That's a good question. So I retired in June of 2020, and I thought I was done. And then I continued to reach out to people I knew in the school system throughout the pandemic, and I worked for Salisbury University, so I continued to be in classrooms throughout the pandemic. And over, I kept having people say, we think you should run for the Board of Education. Maybe just because I can't keep my mouth shut, who knows? But the thing that strikes me is I've always just been interested in education. Everything I've done with my life really has been about educating children, from Girl Scouts to the little science clubs that I used to have, to the daycare that I ran in my house, to being on the PTA at Glen Avenue. It's always been about education. That's my goal. I want to improve education. I've enjoyed knocking on doors throughout District 2. I've enjoyed being down in Tyaskin and Nanticoke and Bival and Fruitland and Eden and Allen. And it's just, I understand what it feels like to be in the outer edges of the county and feel like you're ignored. Because I started my career here at Northwestern, and we felt ignored out there. I had to teach over here off of Nanticoke Road with spotty internet during that first bit of COVID. I understand those issues. But more importantly, I understand that I don't understand everything. I know that I don't know everything, even after 19 years in the classroom. I know I don't, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to listen, and I'm willing to continue talking. Well, until his other hand. So I hope that you'll consider electing me. I hope that I get to work with Bonnie and George, and I hope that I can continue providing a good education for the children of Wacomico County. I know.
I retired this past June after 44 years with Wycomico County Public Schools. Both my husband and I are 1972, 71 graduates of James M. Bennett. Our children graduated from Wycomico High School. Schools in Wycomico County have always been a part of our lives. We have a great school system. We have problems now, but we have a great school system. I can assure you, our school system is not trying to indoctrinate your students, your children. The families of Wycomico County can rest assured that we are providing an education that is top-notch. We have difficulties. Our teachers right now are stressed due to all the mandates and the additional resources that they are being asked to use in the classroom. They're stressed in some cases because of the behaviors in the room. They're stressed in some cases because they're not getting their students to school. Keep in mind, our schools are a microcosm of our community. We see it out there in our community. We see it in our schools. And the only way that this is going to be resolved is if we work together as a community. And so I think to that end, we need to have more community meetings like this and discussions where the community can talk to the board members, can talk to the administrators, can talk to the teachers to find out just what it is that they need and what they can offer in ways of helping the teachers lessen the amount of stress on them and to help our students be more successful. Thank you.
So I think this is the first office I've run for since I was a sophomore in high school. So this has been a big learning experience for me. But the reason I decided to do this was because of what I was hearing in the media, both nationally and locally, people politicizing the schools. Remember, we are a nonpartisan board, but people politicizing the schools or attempting to do so. And this concerned me. The other thing they were doing, I think, is undermining parents' confidence in the schools by raising all these, to me, silly issues, CRT, SEL, those types of things. I don't think they are a real issue. I think they are culture war issues that these people have an agenda, and I think their agenda, if I can be blunt, is to take money from the public schools, take public money out of the public schools, and use it privately. And that's why I decided to run. I'm concerned about this. I want our public schools to serve all of our students. And to do that, we need the parents and teachers working together. The other thing these groups are doing is they're trying to turn parents against teachers. You cannot have a successful public school system unless the parents and teachers work together. That's what we have to do. I mean, I was an ESL teacher. And if you're an ESL teacher in particular, you have to have continuing contact with your parents. Because those kids, you know, they don't speak English, neither do their parents, but you've got to work constantly with them. And so that's what we need to do, get the parents and teachers to work together, not against each other.
Before we close this evening, I want to once again thank everyone who attended both in person and who's watching us at home at PAC 14. I want to thank all the lovely panelists, candidates who not only stepped up to run, but show up to tonight to speak and talk with the community. There's a couple community members that I would like to highlight as well. Joe Dickerson, the past chief of this very fire department and currently a community leader. The current president of the fire department here in Westside, Don Messick. Of course, our friends at PAC 14 for recording and giving us all this wonderful technology to even do this event. I would like to thank our a member of our comms team, Tyler Jones, who helped tonight in terms of getting tech, helping us work with PAC 14 and all things technical. And finally, Karen's favorite person, Connor Romblatt, who did the timekeeping and helped us get this work and get the community actually out tonight. The last thing I would like to say, because I know you're all probably dying to go home, is please remember to vote in this upcoming election, whether it's voting by mail, which you can still request a ballot, whether it's showing up at early voting at the Civic Center or the First Baptist Church, October 27th through November 3rd, or on Election Day, November 8th at your polling place. Please go out and vote. And finally, we strongly encourage you to check out more about the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, online at our website. We'd love to continue to get the community involved, and we look forward to having many more events in Bival, Tyaskin, Danacoke, and all across District 2 and the Lower Shore. Thank you all so much for coming. Please have a safe evening, and you all have a great evening.
And please remember, in 2018, one of the Board of Education races was decided by one vote. So get everybody to vote.